Right now, in an office tower in Tokyo, a man you'll never meet is quietly deciding what your next mortgage will cost. He's never seen your house, and he may have more influence over your mortgage rate than most people realize. In some cases, even more than Jerome Powell, because one of the biggest risks facing the American economy won't be the one on the news. It won't be the AI bubble. It won't be China. It won't be whoever's yelling in the Oval Office this week. It'll be something so boring that financial media literally cannot turn it into a thumbnail. And the tell is everywhere: mortgage rates that won't fall, markets that lurch for no reason. But the answer isn't in Washington. It lives in Tokyo, inside the single most boring asset on earth, a Japanese government bond. For 30 years, that bond has been the duct tape holding the global financial system together. And in 2026, it's peeling. My name is Nick, and I think about this more than any healthy person should. Hit subscribe, because the threat nobody's watching is always the one that lands first. Now, to understand why a country on the other side of the planet gets to decide what your mortgage costs, we have to rewind all the way back to 1992. Because 30-something years ago, Japan had the hottest economy on earth. And then its asset bubble burst. Real estate collapsed, the stock market collapsed, and Japan walked into what people now call the lost decades. 3 decades of an economy stuck in neutral, no real growth, no inflation, no rising wages. It was like somebody hit pause on the entire country and then lost the remote behind the couch for 30 years. So the Bank of Japan did what every central bank does when it runs out of ideas. It cut interest rates to zero. And when zero didn't work, it got creative and cut them below zero. And when negative rates still didn't work, it rolled out something called yield curve control, which sounds like a forgotten Bond villain, but actually just means the central bank promised to cap long-term interest rates no matter what the market wanted. In plain English, Japan didn't just lower interest rates, it put them in a medically induced coma and stood guard over the bed. Now, I know, Japan in the 90s feels about as relevant to your life as a fax machine. But stick with me, because this dusty piece of history quietly built the exact world you're standing in right now, including the number on your mortgage statement. And that created a very specific, very expensive problem for everyone in Japan with money to manage. So let me introduce you to a guy. We'll call him John. John is in his 50s, and he's been running money for the same big Japanese pension fund his entire career. His job is brutally simple. Millions of ordinary Japanese retirees are counting on that fund to pay out year after year, and they are not interested in excuses, and John has a problem. His own government's bonds, the safest thing he can buy, pay him basically nothing, zero. So John has exactly 2 options. Option 1, accept earning nothing and slowly explain to a room full of retirees why their pension is going nowhere. Or option 2, take his money somewhere it actually gets paid. John, being a reasonable man who enjoys keeping his job, chooses option 2. And here is the move that quietly ran the world for 30 years. John borrows money in Japanese yen, where it costs him almost nothing, because remember, Japan glued its rates to the floor. Then he converts that yen into American dollars and buys US Treasury bonds paying 4, sometimes 5%. He borrowed at basically zero and he's earning 5. He just pockets the difference. That right there is the yen carry trade. Borrow where money is free, invest where money pays, and keep the spread. Now picture not just John, but every pension fund, every life insurer, every bank, and a whole army of hedge funds all doing the exact same thing for 3 straight decades. At its peak, the best estimates put this trade somewhere in the trillions of dollars. Trillions. With a hard T, a huge slice of the global hunt for yield, the one that helped fuel booming markets and cheap borrowing costs, was financed by money that started its journey in Tokyo. And here's the part that should make the hair on your neck stand up. All of that, the whole arrangement, rested on one single assumption: that Japanese interest rates would stay near zero forever. Forever. That's a bold word to bet the global financial system on. And in 2024, that bet broke. Because after 30 years, Japan finally got the one thing it had been chasing the whole time: inflation. Prices started rising for real, and a central bank cannot keep interest rates in a coma while inflation is wide awake and emptying its citizens' wallets. So in 2024, the Bank of Japan ended yield curve control and raised interest rates for the first time in 17 years. Then it did it again and again. And by the time we get to where we're standing right now in 2026, Japan's policy rate sits around 1%. That probably sounds adorable to an American, 1%. But for Japan, that is a 30-year high. That is an earthquake. And the second Japan started hiking, the math that ran the entire planet flipped upside down. Because think about what just happened to John. Borrowing in yen isn't free anymore. It costs him real money now. Protecting himself against the currency swinging around costs him more, too. And suddenly, that nice American treasury paying him 5% doesn't look nearly as juicy once you subtract everything he's now paying to hold the trade. The free money wasn't free anymore. And when free money stops being free, people don't politely wind things down. They sprint for the exits all at once. We actually already got a preview of what that looks like, a dress rehearsal. And it was ugly. On August 5th, 2024, the carry trade had its first real heart attack. The Bank of Japan had just hiked, a weak American jobs report landed at the same time, and the yen suddenly shot up in value. Now, if you're John, a rising yen is a nightmare because you borrowed in yen and now it costs more to pay that loan back. So everybody tried to unwind the same trade at the same moment. Japan's stock market, the Nikkei, fell about 12% in a single day. Its worst day since 1987, let that sink in. Worse than anything during the 2008 financial crisis, worse than the COVID crash. Trillions of dollars in market value got vaporized around the world in about 72 hours. The S&P 500 got dragged down with it, and for 3 days it genuinely felt like the floor had been pulled out. And then, just as fast, it stabilized. Everyone exhaled, and financial media went right back to arguing about Nvidia, but that wasn't the end of anything. That was the trailer, because here's what most people watching that day completely missed. The carry trade unwinding isn't a one-day stock market scare. It's the early sign of something much bigger and much slower. Some of the money is beginning to head home. After 30 years of Japanese capital flooding out into the world chasing yield, it's finally turning around and walking back through the front door. Like this, there's a word for this, and it's the single most important word in this entire video: repatriation. The incentives are shifting, and some of that money is beginning to come home, and it makes perfect sense if you're John. For 30 years, he had to leave Japan to find any return at all. But now his own boring Japanese government bonds actually pay something. He can earn a real return at home without taking on currency risk, without the borrowing costs, without any of the gymnastics. So why on earth would he keep his money parked in America? This is the open loop I planted at the very start, so let me close it. I told you a Japanese pension manager you'll never meet may have more influence over your mortgage rate than most people realize. Here's exactly why. Because when John and 10,000 money managers just like him start bringing their money home, two enormous things happen at once. One, the Japanese government bonds they're now buying, the long-dated ones, the 30 and 40-year bonds, those are getting sold off, and their yields are climbing to levels Japan hasn't seen in decades. And two, far more important for you, America just lost one of its most loyal customers, because here's a fact that almost nobody walking around knows. Japan is the single largest foreign holder of American government debt on the entire planet. Not China, Japan. For decades, Japan was one of the most reliable sources of demand for U.S. treasuries, helping absorb enormous amounts of American debt. They were the reliable regular at the diner who ordered the same thing every day and always tipped well. And that regular is starting to skip meals. And it's not just one regular skipping one meal. Japan as a whole has been the world's biggest net creditor nation for years. Basically the bank the rest of the world quietly borrowed from. Its giant government pension fund and its army of life insurers sit on mountains of foreign bonds, a huge chunk of it American debt. For 3 decades, that money only ever flowed one direction, out. But beginning in 2025, there were several periods where Japanese investors became net sellers of foreign bonds, something markets were watching closely. And meanwhile, back home, those long-dated Japanese bonds I mentioned, the 30 and 40-year ones, have been printing record high yields because buyers now demand to be paid more to hold them. The single most boring corner of global finance is suddenly throwing off sparks, okay? So why does one quiet buyer pulling back actually matter to you, specifically sitting where you are right now? To answer that, I need to hand the mic to someone with a lot more credibility than me. Ray Dalio built the largest hedge fund in the world, and he has been pounding the table on exactly this. His point, in plain terms, is that the bond market is the backbone of every other market. It's the risk-free interest rate that quietly sets the price of basically everything else, your stocks, your house, your retirement account, all of it. And when the supply and demand picture for bonds breaks, you get a very specific, very recognizable set of symptoms. Long-term interest rates climbing, the currency sliding, gold ripping higher. Dalio has warned that in a worst case scenario, debt dynamics can begin feeding on themselves in what he describes as a debt death spiral, which is a phrase that should probably get more airtime than it does. So here's the lever everybody's staring at, and here's the lever that actually matters. Everyone obsesses over the Federal Reserve. People decode Jerome Powell's eyebrows during press conferences like it's a Marvel post-credit scene, but the Fed really only controls one thing directly: short-term interest rates. The overnight stuff, the long end of the curve, though, the 10-year, the 20, the 30-year Treasury, those are mostly set by something far less dramatic and far more powerful: plain old supply and demand. How much debt is for sale and how many people want to buy it? Hold on to that, because it's the whole game. And right now, the supply side is, to put it gently, a lot. The United States is running deficits in the neighborhood of $1.75 trillion a year. The total national debt has blown past $37 trillion. And in 2025, Moody's, the last major credit rating agency that still gave America a perfect score, finally took it away. So now put those two halves in the same room and watch what happens. The Treasury has to sell a genuinely staggering amount of new debt every single year just to keep the lights on. And one of its most reliable buyers is quietly heading for the door. When supply goes up and demand goes down, there's only one way to convince new buyers to show up. You have to pay them more, which means yields on long-term treasuries have to rise. Right now, the 30-year sits up around 5%, a level that used to be unthinkable. And the moment long-term rates climb and refuse to come back down, this stops being some sleepy bond market story. It becomes an everything story. Let me show you exactly how it reaches in and touches your actual life, because this is where it gets personal. Start with stocks. When analysts figure out what a company is worth, they take all its future profits and discount them back to today's dollars using, you guessed it, long-term interest rates. When those rates go up, the math automatically says every future dollar is worth less today. So even if a company is doing great, even if earnings are perfectly fine, the price investors are willing to pay for it quietly shrinks. That's why the market can suddenly get the shakes on a day when there's no bad news at all. It's not the news, it's the discount rate moving underneath everything like a tide going out. Now your mortgage. Remember John's money coming home and skipping those treasury auctions? Mortgage rates tend to move closely with the 10-year treasury yield, so if that yield won't fall, neither will your mortgage rate. This is the brutal answer to a question millions of people keep asking. Which is why won't mortgage rates just go back to 3% already? So they may not fall nearly as much as people expect if global demand for US debt continues to weaken. Picture someone, we'll call her B, who's been white knuckling it in a house she bought at 7%, just waiting for rates to drop so she can refinance and finally breathe. B keeps waiting for the Fed. B is watching the wrong country. Her relief isn't coming from Washington. It's being decided in Tokyo by a guy like John who just decided to keep his money home. And it doesn't stop at houses. Roll the whole thing forward to corporations. Back in 2020 and 2021, when money was practically free, companies borrowed like the bank had a going out of business sale. 90% off, everything must go. A whole lot of that debt is now coming due, and it all has to be refinanced at today's much higher rates. There's a wall of corporate debt and commercial real estate loans hitting their maturity dates over the next couple of years, and every dollar of it has to be rolled over into a world where borrowing is expensive again. When that gets pricier, companies pull back. They hire less, they build less, they take fewer swings. Credit is the bloodstream of the corporate world, and the long end of the curve is its blood pressure. So if you've made it this far and your brain is fully lit up by all this, real quick, I run a school community for people who want to build faceless finance channels exactly like this one, where we dig into stories like this together and figure out how to actually turn that into something real. It's linked down below if that's your thing. No pressure at all. The rest of the video stands completely on its own. So now zoom all the way back out and you can finally see the whole machine. For decades, the United States benefited from one of the largest and most influential global carry trade dynamics ever seen. Japanese capital came pouring in, kept our borrowing cheap, propped up our stocks, and held our mortgage rates down. And almost nobody even knew it was happening, Now that trade is unwinding slowly, quietly, and the foundation underneath everything is shifting. Now, let me be fair to the other side of this, because I'm not here to sell you a panic. This is not a button somebody presses on a Tuesday afternoon and the world ends by dinner. The Bank of Japan moves at the speed of a glacier wearing a business suit. Japan still holds an absolute mountain of American debt, and it is not dumping all of it tomorrow. It's entirely possible this whole thing plays out as a slow leak over many years instead of one dramatic pop, slow enough that you barely feel it on any given day. And honestly, that's probably the most likely version of events. But here's the thing about a slow leak. The direction is what matters, not the speed. The buyer who reliably showed up every single year for 30 years is quietly turning into an occasional buyer. And once a trend like that sets in, it does not tend to reverse just because we'd prefer it to. So even the calm, undramatic version of this story still ends in the same place. The cost of money could remain structurally higher than many investors became accustomed to during the era of ultra-low rates, and here's the part that genuinely gets under my skin. Traditional financial media is barely touching this, and the reason is almost insultingly simple. It's not clickable. Nobody's stopping their scroll for the phrase cross-currency carry trade and the repatriation of Japanese institutional capital. That requires patience and nuance, and frankly, more brain cells than a 30-second clip allows for. So instead, the whole story gets flattened into a comforting little lie. The lie that the Fed cuts rates and everything magically fixes itself. That liquidity just always shows up. That somebody, somewhere, will always be there to buy our debt no matter how much of it we print. It's a lovely bedtime story. It's just never been a guarantee. But what if they don't? What if the largest foreign buyer of American debt quietly decides to take a step back and stay home? Then global liquidity tightens. And liquidity is the oxygen in markets. You don't notice it at all until it's suddenly harder to breathe. And I just walked you through, when that happens, it doesn't hit one thing. It hits the price of money everywhere all at once. Your stocks, your mortgage, your job, your retirement account. And I want to be clear about who actually eats this, because it's never the people who caused it. The hedge funds will be fine. They're always fine. It's the couple who finally clawed together a down payment and now can't make the monthly number work. It's the small business owner whose line of credit got quietly more expensive overnight. It's the guy 3 years from retirement watching his account get the shakes for reasons no headline will ever bother to explain to him. That's the quiet part of all this that gets me. The bond market never raises its voice. It doesn't have to. It just changes the price of money underneath everyone all at once and walks away whistling. So that's the real reason I started this channel. To shine a light on the unglamorous, unclickable stuff that actually moves the ground under your feet, the stuff traditional media won't cover because it doesn't trend, if that's the kind of thing you want to actually understand. Instead of just doom scroll past, hit subscribe and turn the notifications on. And if you want to go deeper, that community of channel builders I mentioned is waiting downstairs, because here's the one idea I want you to walk away with. The loud risks, the ones screaming at you from every headline, those are usually already priced in. The risk that actually takes you out is the quiet one, the boring one, the one nobody's watching. It always has been. So brace for impact.